I didn't forget the jacket so much as I shed it, like a second skin I didn't need. It was past midnight, the bar humming like an aquarium of blurred faces and soft light, and I remember thinking how the sleeves smelled faintly of cedar and her perfume. In the cab home, I decided I'd pick it up tomorrow. We call choices accidents when we need sleep. Morning arrived with the kind of silence that feels staged. My wife, Lena, was already out running errands, a phrase that covered both groceries and the vanishings that had crept into her days. She'd been radiant lately, new dresses without occasions, lipstick that looked like it cost time. I told myself I was lucky. People in love mistake the spotlight for warmth. At noon, I walked back to our place of habit, Harbor and Rye. Weekdays, the bar was the backstage of our lives. Brighter light, honest air. Without the Friday crowd, you saw bones you never notice. The scuffed brass footrail, the etched mirror. My jacket would be inside with a tag on it. Routine. Safe. The front door was locked. A clipboard read, "Staff prep, back at 4." I could have left. Instead, I drifted along the brick toward the alley where deliveries came, where the real work happened. The door marked "Staff" only opened with a sigh, as if the building itself were tired of holding its breath. Lena stepped out first. She didn't see me. One hand combed her hair back the way she did when she wanted to feel pristine. The other smoothed the hem of a dress I didn't know, the kind of fabric that catches light even in shade. Behind her, Marco, our friendly bartender who remembered my rye, leaned in the doorway, smiling the unafraid smile of someone who thinks the world will forgive him because he can pour it neat. I froze. Not the dramatic freeze where the soundtrack stops. More like a body recognizing a cliff. The alley smelled of citrus cleaner and faint rain though the sky was dry. Lena said something I couldn't hear. Marco touched her elbow, small and ordinary, but it hummed with intimacy. She glanced toward the street and tugged her dress where the zipper curved. It was a post-something gesture. Private, careless. I stepped backward into the flat light, feeling like a photograph that didn't develop. My first thought wasn't anger. It was arithmetic. The late nights, the new dresses, the hair she wore up leaving the house and down coming home. The ledger balanced too neatly. I wasn't ready to say the word. Even in my skull, I didn't say it. The mind protects itself with paper walls. They didn't see me. If Lena looked up, if Marco's laugh spilled into the alley, I might have spoken, and that would be an ending masquerading as a beginning. Instead, I watched her walk away, quick small steps, heels kissing concrete. Marco went back inside, and the door swallowed the quiet. I could have chased her. I could have thrown a scene into the daylight and let it splash everyone. But performances are for people who already know the script. I had nothing except the memory of her hand in her hair and the shape of a smile that no longer belonged to me. I circled to the front and peered through the glass. A bar back cut limes. The TV looped yesterday's triumphs on mute. On a peg behind the counter hung my jacket, navy wool, a little wrinkled. I wanted to put it on and feel the shape of my old life in the sleeves. Funny, the mind's superstition, how fabric might mean safety, how a garment might be a door back to a room already emptied. My phone buzzed. Lena, a heart, and pick up coffee? Oh, you. Oh, me. I typed on it, then erased it. I stared at the jacket until my reflection turned patient. The plan didn't arrive as a plan. It arrived as curiosity pretending to be forgiveness. I walked away without knocking, without asking for the key, letting the jacket stay exactly where it was. What's the harm in one more day? Let time answer questions I wasn't brave enough to ask. On the way home, I passed a pawn shop window where a forest of electronics lounged under fluorescent confession. That was where a smaller idea sharpened into something dangerous. If a jacket can hold a scent, it can hold a secret. If sleeves remember, pockets can listen. I stood there long enough for the owner to look up twice. For the first time since the alley, I felt something steadier than nausea. Focus. I didn't buy anything. Not yet. I walked home rehearsing a tone, a smile, a weightless joke for dinner. The world had moved a fraction of an inch, but I could feel the tilt. Love isn't blind, it's a magician. It directs your eyes to the hand with the flower and teaches you to applaud while the other hand steals your watch. When I reached our apartment, Lena wasn't back. The living room was citrus clean, a vase of tulips in the window. I sat and pictured the alley as it was, gray, narrow, honest. I let the picture harden into a promise. Tomorrow, I decided, I would forget my jacket again. Sleep arrived like a waiter who keeps glancing at the door. When I woke, Lena was already in the kitchen, humming over a pan, her hair in a loose knot that looked like a promise half-kept. She wore a gray sweater skimming her collarbones, a crescent of skin left visible. Desire is strange. Even with suspicion bruising me, part of my body leaned toward her as if memory had gravity. She caught me looking and smiled, small and warm. "Coffee?" she asked. I said yes, because refusing would make the room tilt. We ate without weather. Talk skimmed across errands and emails. She mentioned a meeting with a friend from yoga. I said I might grab my jacket later if the bar reopened early. "Oh, right, your jacket," she said, eyes dipping to the counter. "Don't forget again." The joke sat between us like a stone wrapped in tissue. I kissed her temple on my way out and hated how natural it felt. I didn't go straight to Harbor and Rye. I went to the pawn shop with the loud fluorescent lights. Inside, glass cases glowed with cameras, watches, and gadgets that used to mean bigger lives. The owner wore a vest and a permanent suspicion. "Looking for anything particular?" he asked, and my heartbeat answered before I did. "Evidence." "Something small, for recording lectures," I said. He smiled at the lie because it's the kind people tell themselves. He showed me a voice recorder the size of a thumb drive, with a pinhole mic and a sliding switch. I bought it with cash and asked for a plain receipt. On the way home I tested it, murmuring harmless sentences like a rehearsing ghost. The playback was crisp, catching the jingle of my keys and the rasp of my palm against denim. I pictured the jacket hanging behind the bar, the recorder in its inner pocket like a new vein. The plan took on edges. Fear made a counteroffer. I accepted none of it. Lena texted, "Running late. Don't wait for me." I read it twice and felt both the ache and the permission. I showered and stood under the spray until my skin felt newly minted. When I dressed, I chose a shirt she liked, the one that made her say my shoulders looked dangerous. I didn't know if the danger would be to us or to the dream we were pretending to polish. Harbor and Rye opened at 4. I arrived at 4:10 with a practiced sheepishness. Marco looked up from polishing a glass and whistled. "The man returns for his armor," he said, reaching behind him to retrieve my navy wool. He smelled like citrus and the faint musk of someone who enjoys being near heat. He had that bartender ease, the way his wrists wrote quick cursive loops in the air. If I hadn't seen the alley, I might have liked him again. "Mind if I keep it here another day?" I asked, patting my shirt as if I had another layer. "Got a second thing after this, and I don't want to lug it." He shrugged. "We've hosted worse." He hung it back on the peg. I made sure my hand brushed the lapel, as if smoothing a thought, and slid the recorder into the inner pocket with a motion I could have sold as affection. The click of the switch felt like a secret handshake with myself. I ordered a rye. The first sip burned steady. In the mirror above the bottles, the room replayed itself with a heartbeat of delay. Marco chatted with a couple, his laugh tilted toward charm. I pictured his mouth close to Lena's ear, voice dropping to the register that turns promises into rooms with warm lamps. I hated the image and I kept it. At 4:37 the back door swung and a gust of cold air folded through. She didn't come in, not then. But I felt a ripple in the staff, a small sharpening, as if the room knew a chord had been struck somewhere out of sight. I finished my drink and left the tab open, saying I'd be back to close it. Outside, the daylight looked pressed flat. I walked a block and doubled back along the alley. The staff-only door held its breath. Clatter, laughter, the hum of refrigeration, nothing else. I pictured my jacket on its peg, listening. Fabric could be a witness. The thought made my skin prickle, not only anger, but a hunter's focus. On my way home, I bought groceries we didn't need and cooked a dinner that smelled like reconciliation. When Lena came in, her hair was down. She kissed my cheek, cool from the night air. A faint, foreign cologne haunted the space between us. She told a story about her yoga friend that was all nouns and no verbs. I folded each word into a quiet drawer. Later, in bed, she curled against me, a habit older than lies. Her thigh rested over mine. Heat moved between our skin like a carefully kept flame. She traced a finger along my collarbone and laughed when I shivered. We kissed, slow, then hungrier, and I censored the word in my head again. Wanting her felt like pressing on a bruise. We didn't go further. I ended the kiss with a hand against her cheek, and she accepted the pause with a contented sigh that hurt more than rage would have. When she slept, her palm still on my sternum, I stared at the ceiling and counted the seconds between radiator clicks. Somewhere, a red light in a pocket glowed like a tiny lighthouse, sweeping a silent room. Tomorrow I would return for the jacket I still hadn't remembered. Tomorrow I would learn whether silence could be taught to speak. Morning arrived like dull silver. Lena slept in, hair across her cheek like a blackout curtain. Even with suspicion bruising me, something in me leaned toward heat. My body replayed last night's kiss, the hush before private time we didn't have. I slid from bed and let the floor cool me back into clarity. By late afternoon, I stood outside Harbor and Rye, practicing a face that said normal. The bell clicked. 2 booths, a couple at the rail, the bartender's choreography already fluent. Marco grinned the way a friendly man does when he thinks the room belongs to him. Back for your armor? He lifted the navy jacket from its peg. Can't keep making you babysit it, I said, sliding it on. The recorder lay against my ribs like a cold coin. He poured me a rye. We traded lines about almost spring. Up close he smelled of citrus and heat. I didn't stay long. My mask had a short battery. I signed, tipped, waved, and stepped into thin weather. A small park waited 3 blocks away. I sat, unbuttoned, slipped a hand into the inner pocket, and freed the recorder. I said earbuds, pressed play. First, bar noise, ice chiming, drawers, radio-like weather. The rustle of fabric as the jacket moved. Then the staff door exhaled. Footsteps. A woman's voice, low, amused. You said 10 minutes. Lena. A second voice, warm, pitched low to make daytime conspiracies sound reasonable. I said I'd try, Marco answered. Come here. Fabric on fabric. A back finds a wall. A small sound from Lena, half greeting, half surrender. The earbuds fed me the acoustics of closeness. A zipper's sigh, the caught breath when hands know the map. Nothing explicit, nothing needed. Someone could come in, she whispered. That's half the thrill, he said. They spoke in fragments, schedules, a night, worth the risk, me without my name. He's trusting, she said, tone I'd never heard. Fondness salted with pity. He believes the best in people. That's what I like about him, Marco replied. It lets me like the worst in myself. The recording stuttered with movement, then quiet. Lena's breath smoothing, fabric tamed. When she spoke again, her public brightness had clicked back on. Later he asked, text me. No, don't, she corrected. Routines built for no footprints. Same time tomorrow. They floated into logistics. Then he tossed a coin into a hidden well. You know, Marco said, if the new place happens, we don't have to sneak. The new place, Lena echoed. You and your dreams. Our dreams, he said, a small clink. I stopped. New place. Not just an affair, but a geography they were mapping without me. My mind flipped a bad slideshow. Money moved, names signed, a future that assumed I'd remain a generous ghost. I rewound a little. No details, careful nouns, practice discretion. Care means practice. Practice means time. A runner passed. I waited for my hands to steady, then pocketed the device. The bench held my outline a second longer, a shadow of a man who'd learned that silence has chapters. I stood. The recorder under my ribs felt like a verdict. On the walk home, I rehearsed procedure, not rage. Copy the file. Hide the original. Learn how the law names a voice that tells the truth too quietly. Audit the bank statements like an outsider. If there was a new place, it would leave threads I could pull. The apartment smelled of lemon and flour. Lena stood at the counter in one of my shirts, sleeves rolled, hair up in a way that always made me want to kiss the back of her neck. She looked over, warm smile. You got your jacket. It remembered me, I said, hanging it carefully. The recorder settled, acting like a harmless object. She reached across, our fingers laced. Sparks moved in loyal, treacherous circuits. My body, faithful to old scripts, rose to the cue. We ate and talked about little things. She laughed and touched my wrist. The contact traveled farther than it should. I wondered whether the wall at the bar still held the echo of her shoulder blade, whether his hands ever hesitated the way mine did now. Later, in the quiet room, she curled into me and breathed like someone who trusts the dark. My palm found the notch of her waist. The map was still memorized. We kissed, slow and careful, and I felt the moment when heat wanted to become flame. I pulled back. She settled with a contented sound that hurt like a clean cut. The word formed in my mind and censored itself. We didn't cross that border. She slept with a hand over my heart. I stared at the ceiling and listened past the radiator to a small, red-eyed lighthouse glowing in wool. Tomorrow I would copy the file. Tomorrow the jacket would learn more. If they had a new place, I would find the blueprints. If they had dreams, I would measure the cost. Night thinned to resolve, and I lay there, pinned beneath a tenderness that felt like camouflage. The first thing I did was make the silence reproducible. While Lena showered, I plugged the recorder into my laptop, copied the file twice, and hid the copies, one in a folder called taxes_2016, another on a cloud drive. The original slid back into the navy wool. If my jacket could listen, it would keep doing its duty. Did you grab almond milk? Lena called through steam. Yep, I said, opening and closing the fridge. She crossed the kitchen in a towel, water beading on her shoulders. Her shampoo hit me like a memory with a pulse. The towel grazed my hip. Want followed, loyal and treacherous. If we crossed into connection, I knew I'd forgive things that didn't deserve it. She dressed and mentioned a pop-up gallery. I nodded without believing. When she left, I held the door a breath longer, as if the apartment might call her back and confess. By late afternoon, I was at Harbor and Rye. The hour before the crowd gives the room honesty. Marco nodded. Your armor again? Turns out I'm colder than I look, I said, hanging the jacket on its peg. He slid me a rye. We skimmed small talk, baseball, weather flirting with spring. I stayed just long enough to mark the space with my absence, left the tab open, and walked a loop. The alley was quiet, compressors hummed. I pictured my jacket at rest among other coats that knew too much, then went home to wait. Waiting is a room with no windows. I forced myself into tasks with edges, laundry, polishing the sink until the metal reflected someone steadier. I scrolled bank alerts I usually ignore. 2 small charges from the bar sat at odd hours, 11:43 a.m., 2:18 p.m. Weekday timestamps, thin scars. In older statements I found the same pattern, faint as a watermark. Not proof, but rhythm. At 7, Lena texted a photo from a white-walled space. Neon scribble, plastic cup of wine, her smile. Plausible the way clouds are plausible birds. I sent a heart and refused to translate the shadows. When it was late enough to seem casual, I went back. The place had filled with the warmth of strangers. Marco raised my tab. You're squared away, he said. I put the jacket on. The recorder's weight kissed my ribs. Outside, the night had the chalky hush before snow that doesn't arrive. At home, I waited for the rooms to cool from her day. I showered, changed, and pressed play. Noise, a shift change exhaling, ice doing its bells. Footsteps I recognized as hers by their speed. The door grumbled shut. You left it again, Lena said, close enough that the word left brushed the fabric. I was starting to think he'd miss it, Marco answered. But I guess not. Don't, she warned gently. He's kind. You keep saying that like I'm supposed to feel bad, he said. If he's kind, he'll land soft. The sound of closeness returned, soft, unambiguous. Then a phrase that didn't belong to heat at all. Did you send it? Marco asked. Most of it, she replied. We'll cover the rest when the papers go through. The inspector liked me, he said. Told you the space has good bones. Good bones, she echoed. How soon? 2 months if the license doesn't crawl, he said. Sooner if your part clears. My part will clear, she said. I'm done living like a placeholder. A door squeaked. Voices sharpened. They broke apart with the practiced quickness of people who aren't supposed to exist. A minute later, their tones were workplace normal. Glasses clinked. A register beeped. The scene dissolved back into acceptable noise. I paused and let our kitchen quiet rise. License. Papers. Space with good bones. A part that would clear. The words rearranged themselves. Not just an affair, but an architecture. They were building a life you could point to on a city map. I reopened the bank statements and looked past the small charges to transfers I'd glossed. Regular amounts moving from our account to what I'd assumed were savings. Labels were vague. The way you name a folder when you don't want the future to accuse you. I made notes. Bookmarked tabs. The laptop filled with patient windows, each a small skeptical eye. Lena came home bright with art and strangers. She set her phone face down. We ate late, forks making domestic music. She pressed her foot to mine under the table, a private anchor. Later, she tugged me to the couch, head on my shoulder, fingers tracing the seam of my sleeve. Desire rose like a tide that knows the shore. I kissed her until the room narrowed to warmth and breath. "Not tonight," I said. "You okay?" she asked. "I will be," I answered. When she slept, I slid the recorder from the pocket like a thorn to keep. I saved the new file beside the first, duplicated, hidden, backed up. The apartment held its breath. The pocket had brought home proof, and with it a different hunger, not for punishment, but for clarity. Revenge would come. First, I would learn how deep the foundation went, and whose name would end up on the deed of their new place. I used to think rage was loud. It turns out it can be a pencil moving through a ledger, carrying the one. While Lena slept, I built a war room on my laptop. A spreadsheet labeled home_anti, a folder named so_titles, and a to-do list that really meant triumph. Morning made the apartment look honest. Plants watered, shoes aligned, tulips at attention. I brewed coffee and felt the recorder in my pocket like a second heartbeat. At noon, I met an attorney named Herrera. Her office smelled like paper and wool. She didn't ask for my story. She asked for documents. I slid over the summaries and said I had audio of marital misconduct. She didn't blink. "Leverage matters more than theater," she said, drawing 3 columns: assets, timeline, venue. We stayed high level. How a judge hears a whisper when it's replayed, how transfers get traced, how backed up silence becomes a fact. On the way home, I stepped into the licensing office. A clerk with the patience of stone showed me the public terminal. 2 new beverage permits blinked like twin headlights. The applicant was a shell I didn't recognize, but the mailing address sat 1 block off Harbor and Rye. I photographed the entries and felt like a tourist. That evening, Lena was radiant with casualness. "You good for Friday?" "Maya's birthday at the bar," she asked, touching up lipstick like a kept secret. "Of course," I answered, my voice working like a trained muscle. She kissed me by the sink, a quick press that promised more. Promise is the worst part. The body obeys old laws while the mind files charges. After I returned the jacket to its peg with the choreography Marco expected, he poured me a rye and grinned. "That coat's practically staff," he said. The recorder woke in the lining with a tiny click. I felt against my ribs. I left the tab open, promised to close it later, and walked home through streets that smelled like rain that never came. Waiting became a practice. I sorted financial ghosts, transfers to the shell company, small and regular, like someone testing a door before pushing it wide. In old emails, I found a thread from Lena about consulting with a designer, invoice rounded and vague. I built a sheet named Bones, because that's what they kept praising, good bones. Line by line, their future stopped being rumor and turned into geometry. Lena came home late, humming a tune from nowhere. She kicked off her heels and settled into my lap with the easy spill of someone who believes the room is hers. Her hair smelled like smoke and citrus peel. "Miss me?" she asked. I did, and that was the treason. She traced my jaw with a fingertip, slow as a clock hand. "We could go to bed early," she murmured, mischief softening into warmth. Heat moved through me, loyal and unwise. I kissed her. The room narrowed to breath and the soft catch of fabric on skin. I stopped us before the border we both knew. The censored word flickered in my mind and vanished like a moth in light. In the morning, I carried the jacket to a park bench and pressed play. Ice chimed, a door sighed. Footsteps, hers. Marco's voice, amused, making a habit of daylight. Lena laughed, that lower note she rarely used with me. Cloth whispered. A kiss landed, and then business. "Inspector Friday," he said. "Bring what you promised." She answered, "It's in motion. After Maya's party, we're clean." Clean. The word scraped. I saved the file twice, uploaded once, and opened the bank portal. A Friday transfer sat there like a flag no one expected me to notice. I could cancel it with a click, but Herrera's sentence returned. Leverage, not theater. Friday would bring a room full of our friends, witnesses who thought they were there for cake. Revenge wasn't a scene to stage, it was a ledger to balance. I found Lena in the doorway watching me, sleeves pushed to her forearms, eyes bright as if the day had chosen her first. "You're intense today," she said, sliding her arms around my waist. Warmth took me like weather. She lifted her mouth to mine, and for a breath, I almost traded the plan for forgetting. The jacket on the chair looked back at me like a promise with ears. I kissed her once, slow, honest, and stepped away. "Big day," I said. She pouted, laughed, and swatted my shoulder. In the afternoon, I walked to the new address and stood across the street pretending to be on a call. Through dusty glass, I saw two men with a tape measure and a woman marking walls in blue painter's tape. On the window, a peeling notice showed the same shell company name. I took photos until the proof felt heavy. When dusk came, I returned the jacket to its peg one more time. Routine is the leash you put on suspicion. Marco greeted me like a regular and turned to make martinis. I watched the mirror above the bottles and practiced not flinching at my own face. Quiet arithmetic, I told myself. Carry the one. Let Friday do the lifting. The recorder purred in wool, and the bar believed it was just another weeknight. I kept telling myself the story began with a jacket. It made things neat, an object misplaced, a truth recovered. But neatness is what we paste over rot. Friday crept closer, and with it Maya's birthday at Harbor and Rye, the party where I'd smile, toast, and let my jacket listen. I spent the morning sorting proofs into compiles. The recorder slept in wool on the chair, a quiet red eye under the lining like a pilot light. At lunch I met Theo, a former barback who'd moved on to mornings and Mercy. We picked a cafe 2 blocks off the bar's orbit. Theo had the wary kindness of someone who'd seen too much night. You said you just needed to confirm some dates for a reunion, he began, testing the lie I texted. I nodded. Back when Lena started coming in regular, before we got married. Was Marco already behind the rail? He watched the steam rise off his cup. Marco was always there, he said. Charming. Tipsy women loved him. Sober ones loved him more. He gave a small smile. Your Lena, she used to sit at the end by the mirror. I remember because she'd draw little galaxies with her straw in the water ring. Before the wedding? I asked, pretending to be an archivist of sweetness. Way before, he said. Then he winced, the expression of a man realizing a detail holds teeth. There was a night, months before your engagement party. We closed early for a pipe burst. I came in the back to grab mops, and he let the rest hang in the quiet between ceramic clicks. I left them alone. Figured it wasn't my business. The cafe grew suddenly loud, or maybe my blood did. I thanked him, blamed nostalgia, paid too much, and walked into air that didn't cool me. My timeline slid in my hands like a fish. Not a new betrayal, an old one that had built a second life and kept paying rent. Back home, I opened the box of wedding litter we never throw away. Ribbons, menu cards, a cork saved because we needed meaning. Beneath a folded program lay a photo from our engagement night at Harbor and Rye. Lena's smile was a lighthouse. I looked like a man convinced the shore belonged to him. In the mirror behind us, just left of the bottles, Marco's reflection tilted into view, a glint of amusement like a private footnote. I had never noticed him there. People don't see the magician's other hand until they train for it. I checked our old bank statements, months before the proposal. Midday charges from the bar appeared like shy stars. Not many, not loud. Enough to sketch a constellation you only recognize if you already know its name. I reopened the audio from yesterday and heard on the second listen what my shock had sanded smooth. The practiced rhythm of two people who hadn't found each other but had never let go. Lena texted mid-afternoon, a photo of a dress on a hanger, deep green, understated until the light confessed it. Too much for Maya, she wrote. I answered, perfect, and my chest tightened at the truth of it. She was perfect, and that was a problem the law can't sort. She came home earlier than usual, claiming a canceled meeting, and slid onto the counter facing me. The dress hadn't happened yet. She wore a white t-shirt and soft jeans, her hair a loose declaration. She hooked her ankles behind my calves and tugged me closer with a grin. Heat rose like something trained. We could nap, she said, smile bending at the corner into suggestion. The intimacy fluttered and hit the glass. I kissed her anyway, because memory is muscle and I am not a saint. Her hands found my shoulders. Mine found the warm small of her back. Want climbed like ivy, patient, inevitable. I stopped us with my forehead against hers. Tonight's big, I said, which was true in ways she didn't know. She searched my face. You're sure you're okay? The question was a soft door. I locked it with a smile. Absolutely. She laughed and hopped down, hips brushing mine in a tiny accident that felt designed. The room held its breath, then exhaled like a well-trained accomplice. When she showered, I added a page to the war room, a column titled Before. Bulleted beneath it, Theo's memory, mirrored photo, midday charges pre-engagement. I called Herrera and, keeping my voice a shade above casual, asked about dissipation of assets that begins before the vows. Courts hate patterns, she said. Show a pattern and you get a lever. Show intent and you get two. Evening drew its line across the floorboards. Lena stepped out in the green dress. The fabric moved like a promise. She twirled once, half teasing, half wanting me to claim her with my eyes. I did. Desire is not a verdict, it's a weather report. We walked to the bar with our arms touching. She leaned into me at crosswalks out of reflex, and that muscle memory tenderness cut worse than any blade. Harbor and Rye was dressed for a party. Paper garlands, candles trembling in little glass jars, a cake hiding its future under buttercream. Marco caught our arrival and lifted a shaker in salute. For a moment our lives snapped back into the picture we'd sold ourselves. Friends, music, a room that knew our names. I helped Maya hang a collage of photos. In two of them, there we were, Lena and I at some older party. In the far corner of one, a sliver of a smile I now recognized. Marco, half turned, as if exiting a frame he'd never left. I made my circuit, hugging shoulders, filling glasses, laughing where laughter was asked. The recorder woke again when I hung my jacket at its post. It would hear what I needed it to hear. It would hear, if I was lucky, the past speak in the present tense. I felt Lena's hand trace my wrist as she slid by me toward the back, carrying a tray with that dancer's economy I'd fallen for the first night we met. Marco followed with lemons and a private brightness. I stood at the rail, a man enjoying friends, a man admiring his wife, a man counting. That was when the date truly changed, not with Theo's confession, not with the photo in the mirror, but with the quiet certainty that the affair hadn't started at all. It had simply never ended. The jacket could collect voices, the law could collect leverage, Friday could collect witnesses. But the calendar in my head finally flipped to the right year, and the page it landed on was older than our vows. Parties end twice. Once when the cake is cut, and again when the lies refuse to leave with the guests. Maya's birthday wound down in the mellow way goodnights do. I was the model husband, refilling glasses, carrying plates, kissing my wife's temple while memorizing the clock over Marco's shoulder. At 11:12 Lena slipped through the staff door with a tray. At 11:16 Marco followed. I made a joke at the rail and laughed on cue. Near midnight, I took my jacket from its peg and felt the recorder like a pulse. At home, while Lena soaked her feet and hummed, I sat at the desk and pressed play. I sang, door side, then the quiet of two people who believe walls are loyal. You're sure about Friday? Marco's voice, pitched low for secrets. Funds clear tomorrow, Lena said. After that, it can move. We just need a signature he doesn't read. He never reads, Marco said. He trusts. Fabric on fabric, breath finding its practiced shelf. Then business. Inspector's soft, he added. Likes our vision. Our vision, she echoed, bright with money and hope. 2 months. We're finally real. The audio went ambient. Work voices, music returning. I saved the file twice, labeled it NY_night, then opened my spreadsheet and added a row, transfer pre-clearance. Leverage, not theater, Herrera had said. It sounded bloodless. It was also right. At 1 a.m., Lena padded over in an oversized t-shirt, legs bare, eyes warm from wine. She climbed into my lap sideways, as if the day owed us this softness. Thank you for loving my friends, she murmured, fingertips drawing quiet circles on my wrist. Heat slid through me because bodies are archivists even when hearts resign. She kissed me, slow, then urging. I held her, then gentled us back to quiet. Morning brought posture. I emailed Herrera the new audio and a summary of money trails, then met her at 9. She drew a rectangle labeled marital estate and a smaller one labeled other. You can't chase every dollar today, she said, but you can stop new dollars from leaving. We drafted a narrow freeze. Routine bills untouched, discretionary transfers paused. File this Friday after you're somewhere public, she advised. Let the optics do some work. I called the bank and set alerts that would bark if a transfer tried to sprint. I opened an account in my name and moved my next paycheck there. Then I wrote an email to the licensing board, anonymous, polite, full of questions an auditor would love. Shell companies, relationship disclosures, a staffer's girlfriend co-signing a lease. I didn't accuse, I inquired. By noon, I visited the building with good bones. Through the glass, a carpenter chalked lines. Sawdust made its small weather. I took photos and imagined the ribbon cutting, the caption about grit. Another email drafted itself to a reporter who covered restaurants. I didn't send it. Not yet. Leverage, not theater. At home, Lena texted a heart, and "You were sweet last night." I typed "always" and felt how true things can curdle. She added, "Dinner? Just us?" I said yes because I needed yes to look like oxygen. When she came through the door, she looked like a decision I would always keep making. Eyes funny, mouth quick, that confident lean into my space. We cooked together. Her bare shoulder brushed my arm. A current passed like a secret handshake. She slid behind me to reach spices and paused, chest against my back, chin on my shoulder. "Still tired?" she whispered with a smile I'd memorized on better nights. Desire moved in me, memory signed for the package. I turned, let her feel it, then kissed her temple instead of her mouth. "Rain check," I said lightly. She laughed and pretended not to notice the almost. After we ate, she showed me an email about a gallery pop-in Thursday. I nodded, stored the lie, and asked about her day until she relaxed into talking. People tell their bodies the truth before they tell their mouths. Hers loosened whenever the story returned to the future, a phrase she never defined. When she slept, I packed a plan. Tomorrow, return the jacket to its peg, let it listen to daylight. Forward the bank freeze right after she meets Marco, not before. Arrange a meeting with the bar owner, quietly, off-site, about irregular comps and staff patron boundaries. A folder on the table thick enough to make him read. If he listened, the grand opening might lose its bartender and gain a scandal. I lay awake and let the ceiling name my steps. I wasn't aiming for spectacle. I was aiming for gravity. Spectacle burns fast and leaves smoke. Gravity rearranges orbits. When morning came, I would smile, kiss my wife, and carry my jacket back to the place where stories begin, so that later they could end where they should, in courtrooms and contracts, not in alleyways. Terms and conditions, I thought, and slept like someone who had found small print. I brought the jacket back at noon, a weekday hour with no glamour, only truth. Harbor and rye smelled like lemons and sawdust, the season changing its throat. Marco nodded as if we shared a language. "Back on the peg?" he asked. "Back on the peg," I said, letting the recorder's tiny click hide inside the wool like a heartbeat you can only hear with your ear pressed to a door. I didn't linger. I crossed the street to a diner where booths were honest and coffee refilled itself. Headphones in, I let the pocket speak. I chimed. A door sighed. Then Lena's voice, quick and bright, the way she is when she believes the room bends toward her. "We're set," she said. "Transfer today?" He thinks it's the quarterly savings move. Paper rustled. Marco's low chuckle followed. "Good girl." I paused the playback because the phrase made something old and unkind flash across my vision. The bank alert arrived like timing I couldn't have scripted better. "Transfer pending, $14,000." I forwarded it to Herrera with a subject line that was only a period. Her reply came 2 minutes later. "File now." The freeze sailed out of her office and into the courthouse like a hook across water. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. "Transfer blocked." I imagined the line in some internal system turning from green to gray, a door that had always opened deciding to be solid. Time to move the other piece. I'd arranged to catch up with the owner, a careful man named Stan who wore his years like a belt, visible, holding everything up. We met 3 blocks away, neutral ground. I laid out a slim folder. Comp sheets that read like love letters, screenshots of midday charges, an anonymous inquiry drafted for a licensing board, and, last, printouts showing the shell company with a mailing address 1 block from his front door. "I'm not here to burn your place," I said. "I'm here to tell you a bartender is borrowing your roof to build his own." Stan's eyes sharpened as if someone had read him his temperature. I didn't play the audio, I played the arithmetic. He didn't ask for names, he knew them. "Give me the weekend," he said finally, voice flat with decisions. "Don't make trouble in my dining room tonight." "I won't," I said, and meant it. Theater could wait. Home smelled like roasted garlic and a plan I hadn't been told I was in. Lena stood barefoot at the counter, hair in a knot, a single loose strand making intention look like accident. She held 2 papers, crisp as lies. "Can you sign these? Tax cleanup from last year." she said easily. My pulse went still. I skimmed. One form was boring. The other slid a small authorization past a paragraph about joint savings, the lever for routine transfers at my discretion. She'd expected the switch to stay green. I kissed her cheek, slow and grateful. The way you touch a bomb once you've learned which wire not to cut. Let me give these a real read after dinner, I said. I don't want to miss a line. She laughed and pressed her hip into mine. Heat moved through me like a story the body tells itself. Her fingers rode under my shirt and rested on the small of my back, a private claim. For a moment, I wanted to trade everything for the mercy of forgetting. The intimacy fluttered, and I swallowed it like a pill. We ate at the table we'd chosen for sunlight. She talked about possibility without nouns. I answered with questions that sounded like devotion. When she reached for the papers again, I stood and kissed her mouth, soft, then more, until she closed her eyes and the world shrank to breath. After a movie, I murmured against her lip. She smiled, dazed enough to let the signatures wait. Survival can be romantic if you tilt the light. During credits, my phone lit up. Attempted transfer declined. Please contact your bank. She saw the banner. Only a flash, but it was enough to ripple the air. Everything okay? Spam, I lied. Her pupils tightened the way they do when the room stops obeying. She excused herself to the bedroom, phone in hand. 10 steps. A door. Silence pretending to be a wall. I counted to 60, then 90, then stood and rinsed plates that didn't need rinsing. Back at the bar, the jacket listened for me. On the recording, I heard a hard edge I hadn't heard in Lena before. It bounced, she hissed. He must have. Relax, Marco said. He can't have. He's not that guy. A beat. Then his voice lowered into something both soothing and bored. If we need to rush, we rush. Get him to sign tonight. Papers slid, a pen tapped twice. It's nothing. Just authorizing the savings move like always, he coached. Smile. Tilt his world. Make it about you too. He'll do it. I paused the file and stared at the blank television screen, my reflection dim and obedient in the black. It wasn't only betrayal, it was curriculum. They'd been practicing the exam. I forwarded the clip to Herrera, who replied with a single word I'd never seen look so kind. Perfect. Lena returned to the couch slow, composed, one hand smoothing her dress as if the fabric might lie better than a mouth. She laced her fingers through mine. The old current leapt the gap, stupidly faithful. Sign after, she whispered, eyes warm, voice of velvet rope. I kissed her knuckles and smiled like a man who still believed the night had one plot. After, I agreed, and inside me something heavy clicked into place. When she slept, I slid the forms into the drawer with our passports and switched the key to my pocket. I copied the day's audio twice, labeled it switch_flipped, and wrote out tomorrow's map. Finalized the bank freeze in person, schedule the court filing, ping Stan at noon, return the jacket to its peg, and let gravity keep doing what spectacle only promises. I lay beside my wife and listened to her dream under my arm. The sound steady, undeserved, familiar. The house was quiet. The switch had flipped. And for the first time since the alley, I felt less like a man in a trap and more like a man standing where the floor would soon drop away, by design, at last. I didn't plan a spectacle. The room made one for me. Morning began with signatures that mattered. Mine, not hers. At the courthouse, the clerk stamped our freeze like a gavel in miniature. At the bank, a manager with careful hair confirmed the new alerts and the quarantine on discretionary transfers. By noon, Herrera sent a note. Filed. Sit tight. Gravity's working. I wrote back a single word. Understood. Stan texted at 2:11. Come by tonight. Early. A meeting without a subject line is a thunderhead. I told Lena I wanted a date at Harbor and Rye to celebrate surviving the week. She brightened like a room turning on. While she got ready, the jacket watched from a chair. I slid the recorder into its pocket and felt the small click like a door softly closing. She chose a black dress that did whatever light asked. In the cab, she placed her hand high on my thigh, a familiar compass setting. You sure you're okay? She asked, thumb tracing a quiet path. My body answered before I did, that loyal betrayer. Better with you, I said, hating the truth and needing it. When she leaned in, her perfume folded memory over the present. The censored word moved behind my teeth, and I swallowed it with a smile. Harbor and Rye was all beginning of evening hush. candles waiting for their purpose, glasses lined like a choir. Stan met me near the service station with the face of a ship's captain in weather. 2 minutes, he said, and led me to the office. I showed him nothing new, no audio, only numbers, names, the shell company's address. He tapped the comp sheets I'd printed and nodded once. You were right not to burn the place down, he said. I'll put the fire where it belongs. Back at the bar, Lena slid onto the stool beside me like a promise delivered. To us, she said, and clinked. Heat worked its usual spells. My body kept offering treaties my mind refused to sign. Marco moved along the rail with that dancer's ease, laughter positioned for maximum effect. When he reached us, he gave me a grin that pretended nothing had ever been behind any door. Good to have you too, he said, and placed a rye in front of me without asking. At 7:42, the playlist softened into a track I didn't recognize, then into nothing. A beat of puzzled quiet passed. The overhead speakers breathed, and another sound came through. The faint chime of ice, the sigh of a staff door, and then a voice I knew better than my own. We're set, Lena said, recorded, not live, bright and sure. Transfer today? He thinks it's the quarterly savings move. Marco's low chuckle followed, soft enough that only the first 3 tables heard it. Good girl. Sound can rearrange furniture. Conversations thinned, heads turned. The glassware held still. In the second of hush before Stan killed the feed, I felt something lessen in me, like a knot deciding to stop being a knot. The speakers went dead. No one breathed. Then Stan walked out from the office, not fast, not slow, the way a man does when everyone will listen even if he whispers. Marco, he said, not loud at all. Office. The bartender's smile went rope-burn tight. He glanced at Lena the way gamblers glance at doors. She didn't look back. He wiped his hands like an actor buying time and followed Stan, shoulders still squared for charm. The room resumed a narrow version of normal. Murmurs, a cough, a spoon tapping china because it didn't know what else to do. Lena stared at her drink and saw a future. I stared at mine and saw math. She turned to me with a practiced softness, the one that had always worked. Let's step outside, she whispered, touching my wrist, the exact pressure that usually opened every lock. The old current jumped the gap. Want rose, obedient as tide. I made myself smile. In a minute, I said. She leaned closer, breath warm at my ear. Sign the forms after, she murmured, as if we were discussing dessert. It's just the savings thing, you know that. She kissed the angle of my jaw, small and precise. The room went slightly out of focus. Stan returned alone. He didn't look at me or at her. He looked at the room. Marco's last shift was tonight, he said, voice even. Tabs are on me for 10 minutes. Then we're back to work. A murmur passed like wind through grass. Behind him, the office door shut. Final as a quiet sound. Lena's fingers tightened. What did you do? She whispered, and the question landed as accusation, prayer, and habit. I stopped a transfer, I said. Then I told the truth to the only people who needed it. She laughed once, bright and unbelieving. You can't be serious. You're blowing up our life over confusion. The word "our" tried to do its old job. It didn't fit the sentence anymore. You were building a different life? I said, and kept my voice where Herrera had trained it to live, low, documented. With my money and someone else's schedule. Her eyes shone with something that wasn't only anger. We can fix this. We can just sign tonight. We'll move clean. I'll make it worth. The sentence reached for heat and found me already stepped back. Attraction still moved in the air like static. That was the unkindest part. The body standing in a house the heart had already vacated. I took the 2 forms from my pocket and set them on the bar between us. With a pen, I drew a single line through the signature block she'd meant for me to fill, neat, deliberate. Not tonight, I said. Not ever. She inhaled as if the room had tilted under her feet. She looked toward the office, toward the staff door, toward the mirror that had been tattling on us for years. Then she reached for fury because it was warmer than loss. You're cruel, she said. You're ruining everything. No, I said. I'm ending what already ended. I slid a narrow envelope to her. Herrera's letterhead, a list of next steps, the line about inventorying assets, the sentence about dates that now stretched before our vows. Tomorrow I'll be at the bank at 9. You can have counsel call mine. She held the envelope like a thing that might bloom teeth. The bar regained a buzz that wasn't comfort, but was something like forward motion. I stood. My jacket weighted on its peg, the recorder warm against the lining. I left it there. Let the room keep it, I thought. It had worn our story long enough. Outside, the air felt new, the kind that doesn't pretend rain. I walked past the window where we'd once been a reflection worth keeping, and kept walking until the music was only a rumor behind me. Gravity, not theater. The floor had dropped where I'd planned it to, and I was still standing. Tomorrow, the paperwork would speak in daylight. Tonight, the room had finally stopped pretending. Morning arrived with a quiet I didn't have to police. Lena's side of the bed was warm but empty, the way a word lingers in a room after you finally decide not to say it. I made coffee and read the email Herrera had sent just before dawn. The freeze had ripened into a stipulation order. Any discretionary movement would ping a judge, not just my phone. Underneath, a neat bullet. We proceed to settlement. Hold firm. It felt like oxygen with instructions. By 9, I was at the bank signing the last papers that made the money behave. At noon, an inspector returned my inquiry. Polite voice, bureaucratic diction, the good kind of cold. He thanked me for the documents, noted irregular commingling between applicant and vendor, and confirmed the application for the new bar was withdrawn pending review. Gravity at work, no flames, just the hiss of pressure leaving a room. That afternoon Stan called. I closed his tab for good, he said. And the comps stopped yesterday, permanently. If you ever want that jacket back, it's on a peg that now tells the truth. I thanked him. I didn't go. That place belonged to a different tense. Mediation was 3 days later. We sat with our lawyers in a room that had spent its life watching people become versions of themselves they didn't plan for. Lena looked incandescently tired, perfect makeup over a map that showed new roads. When she slid into the chair across from me, the space warmed anyway, the way a stove gives off heat after it's turned off. I hated how my body noticed. I hated the part of me that still remembered the slope of her shoulder under my palm, the way she'd laugh when my mouth found that place that made words forget themselves. Herrera led with geometry, not pain, dates of transfers, the shell company's filings, timeline pre-marriage, the audio transcripts reduced to phrases courts respect, admissions, intent, coordination. Lena's counsel tried to make weather out of it, misunderstandings, routine habits, poor labeling. Then Herrera slid forward the still frames from the inspector's notice and the short list of charges reversed by the bank. Leverage matters more than theater, she said softly, almost to herself, and waited. The terms arrived like stations on a familiar line. I kept the apartment and what filled it. The retirement account remained mine. No spousal support either way. Restitution equal to the transfers plus penalties, paid from funds she'd tucked into that shell. The company's debts, current and looming, were hers, separate and sole responsibility, a phrase that would keep biting long after the room emptied. We signed with expensive pens we didn't deserve. When Lena's hand trembled, a useless part of me wanted to steady it. I held my knee instead. We took a break in the hallway. She stood beside a window that made the city look like a model someone else owned. We could have fixed us, she said, voice low, almost kind. We were good at pretending, I answered. That's not fixing. She swallowed, then mustered a smile polished for smaller audiences. Do you ever miss me? She asked, and it wasn't a trap so much as an echo. I told the only truth I could live with. Every hour, I said, and not enough to stay. Her eyes glossed, a tear didn't fall. She nodded like a performer hitting a final mark and walked back into the room where paper turns into law. News about Marco moved the way bad gossip prefers, precise and late. Stan never named why he was gone. The staff learned in the quiet way staffs do. A week later, someone sent me a screenshot. The new place had vanished from a neighborhood account. Comments turned into weather about permits and karma. Theo texted a thumbs up that somehow felt like a prayer. There was, briefly, the physics of habit. I would be in a grocery aisle and reach for her brand without thinking. I would pass a storefront and see a dress she might have liked, and the suggestion would light up the map in my chest that used to tell me how to get home. Some nights I woke with heat already moving through me, the body loyal to a script I had erased. I got up, drank water, stood at the window until the city pulled me back into the hour I actually lived in. One is not a verdict. It is weather, and even storms have an end time. On the day the decree arrived, ink dry, names arranged into distance. I took the navy jacket from my closet and smoothed the lapel. The inner pocket still held the faint impression of the device, a small dent like a healed wound. I wore it to a bar I had never been to, the kind with too much sky in the windows and bartenders who didn't know the story I'd finally finished. A woman 2 stools down laughed at something I didn't hear. For a second my chest answered like an old house settling. I nodded to no one, paid my tab, and stood. On the way home, I passed a donation bin. I opened the lid and held the jacket over the mouth of it, the way you hold a letter you've already written and promised yourself you'll send. It would have been neat. The symbol, the final cut, the jacket falling into a dark that didn't require me anymore. Neatness again, that cheap architect. I folded the jacket back over my arm. Not everything that kept me safe had to be thrown away. At my door I paused, the key warm in my hand. Somewhere downtown a new bar would fail to open, not because I burned it down, but because I had turned off the gas. Somewhere, Lena would learn to live in a story with fewer adverbs. Somewhere, a staff entrance would open for someone else, and someone else would believe walls are loyal. I went inside, not to a victory, and not to a ruin. Just inside, which is the hardest place to arrive. I hung the jacket on its peg and listened to the apartment breathe. The silence didn't need translation anymore. The floor hadn't dropped me. I'd stepped off it and found ground. Gravity had done its work. I turned off the light and let the dark belong to me again.